Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Our Children 2018 World Summit. I'm Alison Morris from Full Potential Parenting, and I want to welcome you back to the summit, to another really great interview. If I do say so myself, I'm excited about this one. My guest for today's interview is Kim Hopkins-Betts. Kim is an independently licensed clinical social worker in Massachusetts and Maine. And she has managed the clinical departments of two organizations serving youth and families in residential facilities, foster homes, therapeutic day schools, and homeless shelters. And she has been working with Dr. Ross Greene's nonprofit Lives in the Balance, and has been a trainer in what's the CPS model, Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, for 11 years. And she is the Director of Outreach and Communication. So we are really excited to have you here with us today and help us understand more about how this model works. So welcome to the summit, Kim. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I've had my two explosive child losses school books for I don't know how many years now. I think Dr. Greene wrote The Explosive Child in, was it 1998?
I think so, yeah.
It's been a long, I don't think I found it until almost a decade after he had first written it. And I remember when I first heard about that book, I was like, oh my God, someone who finally understands my child and isn't thinking that, she's awful and manipulative and belligerent and all these awful terms that that people assign to our kids who are just really struggling. And so can you give us a little bit of background about how Dr. Greene came about to sort of put together this model and where it came from? Like, what was his experience that led him to kind of realize that the way things were was just not working at all?
Sure. Well, first, the premise of the model is that essentially kids do well if they can, meaning that challenging behavior occurs when the expectations placed on some kids outstrips their ability to adapt to those expectations. And so that some kids are lacking the skills that they need to meet certain demands or certain expectations.
And that in and of itself, of course, is huge, like a huge mind shift for a ton of people who believe or tend to believe that kids misbehave on purpose or because they're bad or for all sorts of other reasons. And they attribute it to them being unwilling to, as opposed to their being unable to. So,
well, it's interesting because there's over 50 years of research that backs up that it isn't anything of that, what you just said. It is about lagging skills, that challenging kids lack skills in problem solving, in flexibility, in adaptability, in frustration tolerance, key areas that if you don't have those skills, you're going to have some behaviors for sure. And so Dr. Greene, when did he take a look at that research? Because he wasn't trained this way, in school, and neither was I. We were trained in the way you just talked about, right? That kids are manipulative, that parents are inconsistent or something like that. And so he was working in clinics with families, seeing them for therapy. And he was realizing a couple of things. He noticed that, that challenging kids are not challenging every second of the day. Could feel like that. Certainly can feel like that. But when we slow it down and take a look, they are not challenging it every second of the day. There are some things that they do, even if it's just watching TV or playing video games or eating dinner, but there are things that they do without being challenged. So he was curious about that there must be conditions under which they're challenging. So that's interesting. What are those conditions? The other thing he noticed is that some of the families coming in, they had multiple kids, and they weren't all challenging.
So it wasn't necessarily the parents or the environment either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the same can be true, for situations in which we wish we're healthier for kids. It doesn't seal their fate that there are some kids who rise above and do very well, and there are others who don't. And what the research says, it's all in the skills that the kid brings to the table, and so that piqued his interest. So it must be certain conditions, and it must not be how the parents are parenting. It must be about lacking skills. And that's when he looked at the research, and sure enough, that's what he found, that there are kids who lack skills in the areas of problem solving, frustration tolerance, adaptability, and other areas too, that gets in their way of being able to handle certain expectations that the environment puts on them.
And so at that point, he developed a model, which at the time, right, was called collaborative problem solving, and has evolved to become collaborative and proactive solution.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if some people, like in the books, you'll see it referred to as the collaborative problem solving. So people should not get confused if we start talking about collaborative and proactive solutions and they go back to the books and see it as a different name, because that's just sort of changed. And I don't know if there was a confusion with a different model, or if it just came to be that it felt more appropriate to kind of reterm it.
Well, he referred to it by the previous name until about 2013, and it is his original work. And unfortunately, you could read about it on our website, but Mass General, who he worked for some of the time when he was developing the model, decided that they owned the intellectual property. And so there's been some court stuff involved, and enough
said. All right, that makes sense. So it needed to kind of move on a slightly different direction, but with essentially the same underlying concept. And can you explain sort of what that model is, what it brings to the table?
It first of all, we don't focus on behavior. We focus on the problems that
precipitate
the behavior.
That's crazy, right?
Different, right? We refer to this as an upstream model. So behavior is when kids are downstream. They're drowning in their behavior, right? And a lot of models are focused on how much behavior, how frequent, how severe, and all that, and how do we modify it. That's not what this model is about. This model is getting out of the water, walking upstream, and figuring out what pushed a kid in the water who doesn't know how to swim. The kid doesn't know how to swim because they're drowning, right? So what pushed him in the water in the first place? And let's figure it out.
People are getting hurt as they're flailing around trying to get to shore.
and when we're trying to rescue kids who are drowning, we're getting tired. We're doing the same things over and over again. It doesn't feel like there's any time to go upstream. And our model suggests that if you find the time to go upstream and figure out what pushed the kid in the water in the first place, you're going to find unsolved problems and unmet expectations and the lagging skills that contribute to those. And you focus there, you then will end up having breathing time because the kid will fall in the water less. So we're an upstream model. We're focused on the problems that precipitate behavior. We are, this is a collaborative model where we're working with kids. We're not doing something to the kid. You need the kid as the partner. Because the kid has some crucial information. And also, you get farther when you involve kids in solving the problems that affect their own lives. And you end up teaching them skills by doing that, the same skills that they're missing. So collaborative. And then we talk about timing. Our model is very proactive in nature. There is an application when, the kid is drowning and you need something. There is an application, but your best work is done proactively when the kid is not in the water at all and everybody's calm. So that about sums it up. Collaborative, proactive solutions.
It sounds so simple. And yet, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot of work. There's two main roles for adults, and they take a lot of work. First, you got to do the work to identify why is the kid challenging and when is she challenging. And we have an assessment that helps you do that. And the assessment essentially lists out the skills that the research tells us behaviorally challenging kids lack. And those skills are meant to help you think about the times that the kid is challenging. We call them incompatibility episodes, the clash of the two forces. When the environment makes a demand of the kid that outstrips their skills, you get that clash. Or that incompatibility episode. So we're trying to figure out when those happen. And looking at those lagging skills on our assessment, which is called the Assessment of Lagging Skills and Unsolved Problems, or the ALSIP, looking at those lagging skills helps you think through when are the times we're likely to see that the kid is having their struggles and those incompatibility episodes happen. And then we use some good, solid, kid-friendly language to write those down specifically We don't write behavior in those because those are the words that we're going to use to talk to the kid. So that takes work, identifying lagging skills, identifying unsolved problems. But it's the biggest favor you could do in the life of a behaviorally challenging kid to, at long last, actually understand the kid. And that's going to better position you as a helper to actually help. So that's role number one. Then role number two is getting to work and starting to solve these problems proactively, collaboratively with the kid. And that's when the 3 steps of our model comes in. You want me to roll?
Yeah, and so that's where plan B comes into place.
Yes.
And so some people might have heard of sort of the plan B approach. And so
sure, yeah.
Can you maybe start first with what plan A is, because plan A is the way most of us were likely raised and may have started parenting our kids until we realized that it was a complete disaster.
Right. So there are 3 options you have for handling an unmet expectation. We call them plans A, B, and C. Now, having an expectation and it's being met, you don't need a plan. And expectations are great. That's how you have influence with kids, right? So we love expectations. It's when they're not met that you need a plan. So plan A, and you can remember it, A stands for adult or authority. Plan A is when we solve the problem unilaterally. And usually it involves imposition of adult will, and usually it involves a consequence or something like that. So I've decided that you've lost your TV privileges. I've decided that, you're not allowed to go out. I've decided that you're grounded. So that's, and nobody really needs to be taught how to do plan A. It's very much the air in which we breathe, unfortunately. But
and the underlying premise behind plan A is somehow that the kids either don't understand that what they've done or not done is wrong, right, and that this will teach them a lesson, right?
Right.
And
or also
they'll learn better and do better next time.
Right. That they need more motivation to do better. And so if we consequence the behavior we don't like and we reward the behavior we do like, that's when we'll see change. But that,
again, going back to the premise that it's a matter of unwillingness to behave and not an inability. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Which is missing the boat. And the thing about plan A, it can make things worse. It can push a kid farther downstream, because if a kid doesn't have the skills to adapt to plan A, if you're dealing with a very rigid and flexible kid, and you're laying plan A, it's going to make him explode. He's going to get worse, So plan A makes things worse. It's not a partnership. We're not involving kids in solving the problems that affect their lives. We're not teaching them anything when we do plan A. So yeah, a lot of downsides to plan A. And it's not getting the job done, which is why a lot of people are looking for another alternative. Before I get to plan B though, let me jump to plan C. Sometimes people remember plan C. C stands for child, and that's where you drop the expectation temporarily. And there could be a few different reasons for doing that. Could be that you've got a lot to work on and you have some bigger fish that you're addressing right now. And for the smaller fish, you might decide to temporarily not go after those because you're actually doing some work on the big fish, and that's moving along. You might decide it's a timing issue, and that it's, those times you think to yourself, yeah, we got to figure this out, but right now I have a bunch of company over, or right now I don't have, I've got to get out the door to work, so you might drop it for now, and so it's not giving in though, it's prioritizing. Because some challenging kids have piles of unsolved problems. They have 50 unsolved problems. There is no magic to working on those all at once. And so it's about deciding, what am I actually working on? What am I not working on? And sometimes we do proactive plan C, which is to kind of come up with the kid, what are we going to do to sort of band-aid this temporarily? What are we going to do to just sort of, we're not working on it, but just sort of keep things calm around this issue. Sometimes in schools, it looks like if there's a substitute and kid doesn't do well with a substitute teacher, but we're not working on that because it doesn't happen too frequently and there's bigger fish to fry. When there is a substitute, we'll just have you go to a different room. That teaches nothing. I'm circumventing the problem, but I'm doing it because I have bigger things to work on right now. Eventually, we will get to the problem of substitute and solve it and do some teaching around that. But for now, we're sort of putting it on the back burner. So it's about prioritizing. Giving in is when you start with plan A, it explodes in your face, and then you go to plan C, never mind. Going with plan C right from the gate is prioritizing and being smart and being thoughtful.
Okay, yeah, that's an important distinction. And I think we've all done the A to C, just that tanked. Right. Let's move on.
Yes, yeah. So that brings us to Plan B, which is synonymous with Collaborative Proactive Solutions, or CPS. B stands for both. It's when we're going to pursue the adult expectation, but we're going to do it in a way that we're going to work with the kid. We're going to do it in a way that fosters a partnership. We're going to do it in a way that teaches skills indirectly, so you don't have to worry about how do I teach specific skills. A lot of it gets taught indirectly through the 3 steps. And by doing that, we're not going to make things worse. We're going to make things better. Our research on our model, which is about 25 years deep at this point, shows that we produce more durable, longer lasting solutions through Plan B. So that brings us to CPS.
Okay, I'm going to hold off on a couple of questions until we get a little bit further down, because there's a number that I think that I haven't, and that I think other people listening might have, especially about like teaching the skills and where those deficits come from, and can they be addressed only by a change in parenting model or in involving the child in the decision making. But maybe let's just hold off on that a little while longer until we get through, because there's a few issues, right? There's steps to using this Plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And so where do we start?
Okay, so there's 3 steps. And on our website, I should mention, which is livesinthebalance.org, tons of free resources for parents, educators, providers. There's things you can download and print off. There's video that you can watch and learn. There's audio you can listen to. A lot of resources to help you get good at this, because as you said before, it sounds so simple, but it isn't easy. It takes a bit to learn and to have it become second nature. And so there are 3 steps to the model: the empathy step, the define adult concern step, and the invitation. In the empathy step, you're working real hard to understand the kid's perspective and to get a clear understanding of what happens for the kid, essentially what's going on in their brain in the midst of the unsolved problem. And that takes work. Sometimes you have a kid who doesn't have words. Sometimes you have a kid who has words but is not interested in talking to you. Sometimes you have a kid who's talking but not necessarily giving you the depth of information you need to be best positioned to help. And so the first step can take a little while. We have both a cheat sheet for the 3 steps, but then we have an additional cheat sheet specific to step 1 called drilling cheat sheet, because it lists a bunch of different ways of asking questions to try to elicit information, the kind of information that will be helpful for you to understand what actually goes on for the kid in the midst of the unsolved problem.
And I was going to say, I think that's probably where a lot of people give up, right? So they're like so excited, they could name 50 problems off the top of their head without even going through the sheet, right? They already know what triggers their kid, or where circumstances that present issues for them. And then so they get excited, they want to engage, they start asking questions, and they get nothing. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is the big one probably, like, just kids who just won't engage.
Yeah, it's a very
they're pissed off at their parents still. And I know it's best to try, of course, to wait to engage in this step when their kid is regulated, things are calm. It's not immediately after a big blow up. All those sorts of things can help, right? What a couple examples of ways to get around the, I don't know, like it just happens, or.
Yeah, and these are also referenced on the cheat sheet for folks. But first, I say you gotta, what do you make of the I don't know? What do you make of it? Is it I don't know, I know, but I'm not telling you? I got to tell you, 80% of the time that if we make a shift in the wording we used when we approached them, maybe it sounded like plan A because we accidentally mentioned behavior or something like that. So we talk a lot about wording and how, the words you use to talk to the kid to make sure they're not getting the plan A signal, because plan A makes things worse. And plan A also doesn't breed honesty. So here we are, we're excited, we're learning this, and then we go to talk to the kid and we expect them just to pour it all out because we're making this shift.
At last, you asked me. Here's what I've been dying to tell you for years. Yeah, that doesn't happen usually.
Right. So often we've got to increase their comfort level to reassure them that we're not doing plan A, maybe even acknowledge that we've done plan A in the past and it hasn't worked and it's made things worse and we're trying to do something different. So doing something like that, thinking about timing, like you said, did we think we were being proactive, but the kid's actually in the water? Because then they're not going to talk, right? So making some adjustments on our end. Did we open with an unsolved problem that was way too clumped and not specific? So the kid doesn't know what we're talking about,
Or they're overwhelmed, right? Yeah.
Certainly could be, right. So we can make some corrections that way. Otherwise, again, maybe this is a kid, the I don't know means I don't have the words to tell you, in which case we are a partner and we could take some tentative guesses and ask the kid, maybe to rate them for us. Either they could rate them with words by letting us know we're close, or if they don't have great language, we call it the 5-finger model. They can tell you 0, you're way off, or 5, you're definitely on. I know some folks with kids on the autism spectrum have used like thumbs up, thumbs down, or other kinds of adaptions of that. So that when they try to get some feedback on their tentative guesses, for some kids, it could be this, is that you, Otherwise, I wouldn't panic with the I don't knows. I use the drilling strategies, ask questions in different ways, break the problem down into its component parts so that the kid maybe understands better. And again, the power of reassurance that this isn't plan A and revisiting that, not just one time, but it could have to be multiple times in the same 10-minute conversation. Like, no, really, you're not in trouble. And I'm not mad at you. And I know I have been in the past. And I get that doesn't help. And I'm trying to do something different. And it starts with me understanding where you're coming from on this. And I'm working hard to do that. A lot of reflective listening, which is our number one drilling strategy, saying back what the kid said to you and asking for clarification. It's all meant to demonstrate to kids this isn't plan A. But that, the plan A impact can be a bit of a mountain sometimes the hill, sometimes the mountain to have to overcome and convince kids that no, really totally different, and we're working hard, but we've got to work together as partners. And because if you think about it, plan A, we don't ask any questions, so this sounds different, and they're skeptical. Are you actually interested in what I have to say? Because if we're doing plan A, we don't even entertain their perspective. Plan B, not only are we entertaining their perspective, we're giving it equal weight to ours, but they don't know if they can trust that yet. So,
sure. Well, and I would think too that another common mistake is maybe even if you have things broken apart, to try to tackle too many things too quickly, right? Because then kids feel like you're picking on them. When we just talked about that, now you were asking about this and then about this, and like, oh my God, I have all these things wrong with me that you're trying to fix, and then they feel evaluated and judged and broken and all that stuff. So
and then if you gather your thoughts on the ALSIP, you've got a good thorough ALSIP done, then you can prioritize. Say 2 or 3 things at a time, and that even those would be separate conversations, and that way the kid knows you've taken some things off their plate, which makes room to work on the 2 or 3 big fish you've picked. And that's where Plan C is really helpful for those other things you're not working on yet. And you can message that to kids, like, yeah, I know you struggle with math homework, and yet we have the bigger fish of getting to school on time. So let's work on that. I'm not even going to talk to you about your math homework. One day we'll get there, but right now we're not there. And so removing some things off their plate, making it more possible for them to engage.
So a couple other questions, and then I know we probably should move on just because we have so much to talk about, but some folks may be listening to this and saying, well, this sounds great, but this will never work with my kid with the following X diagnoses, whether it's reactive attachment or oppositional defiant or, bipolar or whatever the description of symptoms that's been laid upon them might be.
Mm-hmm.
But this model is actually designed specifically to work with kids with all those diagnoses, correct? I mean, this is not just sort of mild ADD kind of kid. We're talking explosive kids who may be raging, kids who might have been in residential treatment, kids who...
Actually, I was just going to say, when I learned the model, that's where I worked. Residential care with kids who had been in hospitals, they had been to lockup, they were teens between the ages of 13 and 22, and, kids who had really given up on themselves because everybody had given up on them. I mean, these were the kids who brought weapons to school and were expelled. Those were my kids, right? And I'm always grateful for having that experience, because when I changed the lenses that I used to view these kids and started seeing them in terms of lacking skills, unsolved problems, working upstream with them, partnering with them, whole different world. Their eyes started to have life again. It's the only way I can tell you. It was just that profound. That at long last somebody understands me, and at long last somebody's helping me, and they're done telling me that I'm a bad kid. Because they're not a bad kid. They just didn't know how to do it differently. And when we started working with them and coming up with strategies, they started doing things differently. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It has a place with the toughest of the tough. There's a ton of research that we've done in Maine juvenile detention. So in jail in Maine, it has been implemented with amazing success, so much so that they closed a facility because their recidivism rates of kids returning totally down by, I don't even remember the percentage, but it was big enough to close beds. They didn't need them anymore. That's huge, so real tough kids, absolutely. And then, and I also use this model with my 2-year-old, which, because of our blizzard, you might hear him. Wasn't supposed to be home today, but schools are closed. So,
Right.
And I've used it with him since he was an infant. And that might be perplexing, but it's all in how you approach what you're seeing. It's all in your lenses you're using to view what you're seeing. And that's what's going to set you off on which path you're going to take to intervene and how successful you're going to be. We do have because we do a radio show for parents monthly, and we've done it for years. So we have an archive of topics, and there's a whole page of different shows dedicated to the topic of, is this really going to work with my kid? Whether it's a diagnosis question or an age issue or cognitive ability, we address it all on there. So I definitely encourage you to view that under the parent resources.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you. Because I think, so many parents, they feel like they've tried so many things and things haven't worked. And then they get their hopes up one more time. It's like, oh God, maybe this will really work. But they're scared to hope again.
Well, this might be a good time to let you know that we've tried to create a community, and we have over 13,000 parents in our B Team Facebook group. And so we have a Facebook page, like us on Facebook, but also we have a couple of groups. And for parents of challenging children, the kids who are the toughest of the tough, we have the B Team. And it is an incredibly active, supportive community. You've got parents in there brand new to the model. You've got parents in there who are old hats who've been doing it for years and can share their successes. You've got fathers in there, grandparents, mothers, all of it. So it's a place to not feel alone. And that's in fact what members are often posting about. Finally, you hear me, you understand, we've tried everything. You give us hope. And it's an incredible, I'm getting chills as I talk about it. It's an incredible community to be a part of. So if you're on Facebook, join the B Team. And you can definitely hear from other parents what their journey was like.
Yeah, and that's a huge, huge resource. I hadn't joined till very recently, and I have still yet to take the time to do like a bunch of searches through the different threads to find stuff that's going to be really relevant for me. But of course, it's so it feels so good to finally find people who understand what you're going through and aren't criticizing you for trying a different model. Because of course, that's one thing that parents of these kids get from everywhere. There's all sorts of criticism, negativity. People accuse them of, either being soft or, whatever the case may be. And so it can be really tough. So finding a really supportive group is huge. Let's go back to the model though, because so say we've figured out, maybe we got a little nugget. We're understanding more from our kids' perspective what's going on, and what might be a way that a child would describe. Obviously, it depends on the age, but maybe just for an example.
Sure. We'll say
the kid feels like I just feel like everybody's always picking on me. I don't know. I don't know if that would be like a kind of the answer that they might come up with.
Sure. Well, and it might help if we sort of assign an example unsolved problem to the conversation. So say the unsolved problem is difficulty getting along with Joe at recess. And so that's what we've heard from, if we're the parent, we've heard that from school. We can also be the educator talking to the kid about this, but I know that the summit is geared more towards parents, so we'll talk from that way. A little hard to talk to the kid when you're not at recess, but it's not completely not doable, but because you don't have firsthand knowledge, and there'll have to be some back and forth go between with the school for information. But, for doing step one with the kid, I've noticed you've had difficulty getting along with Joe at recess lately when you're playing basketball. What's going on? And so you drill for information and you ask questions different ways, and the kid might say, well, I just don't think anybody likes me. That would be important information, and I'd want to know as much as I could about that. So when you're playing basketball with Joe and it's just one-on-one, what starts to happen that you start thinking Joe doesn't like you and nobody likes you? Oh, well, he makes fun of me if I miss the basket. Oh, okay. So there's a lot of more information to probably gather about that than we have time to kind of role play here, but starting to really get into what actually is happening and what is this kid's perception about what's happening. So say we end up with, he thinks everybody doesn't like him. He misses the basket a lot. Joe's a better player. Joe teases him and he doesn't know how to handle that. That's a good amount of information. There might be more, but let's pretend for time's sake that that's what we got. So I would summarize that, and I'd make sure I learned everything. And the kid said, yep, you got it. Then I can move on to step two. Step two, by contrast, very short. We're defining the adult concern here. I'm just going to use a sentence because I'm not going to lecture him or anything like that. I'm just going to let him know what my worry is in this situation. My worry is that I want you and Joe and everybody else to be safe at recess. That's probably my worry, because I am guessing what it looks like when they go downstream, right? When they have this thing play out between them. So it's short and sweet. What is my worry? Sometimes worries are about falling behind. Sometimes worries are about everybody feeling good about where they are. Adults tend to have just a finite amount of worries that usually revolve around health and safety and progress and things like that. So one short sentence, I'm worried because my concern is that you guys are safe out there on the playground. And I know you like recess, so I'd like you to have recess time, Then you're ready for step three. Step three is the invitation, and it begins with, there's a lot of repetition in the model because there's a lot of indirect skills training going on. So step three begins with a repeat of what you learned in step one from the kid. And you're going to repeat what you just said in step two. I wonder if there's a way for us to help you when you're playing basketball at recess with Joe and you miss a shot and he starts teasing you and you think everybody's out to get you or doesn't like you, in such a way that everybody stays safe and you still get your recess time. What are your ideas? And you give the kid first crack at it. Because again, it's giving that brain some exercise in problem solving. What the kid says next is often very telling, whether they have ideas that are solid and feasible, or they're kind of out there, or there's no ideas at all, but you're the partner, so you can put ideas out there too. And then you guys pick an idea that meets both sets of concerns. We call that mutually satisfactory. So it meets your concerns and his, not just one. and that you think is actually doable and feasible and has a 60 to 70% shot of working. And you agree to try it, and then you agree to come back to kind of check if it's not working. We'll learn why, and we'll tweak it and try again. You know, as you can imagine, in a case where a parent is talking to a kid about a school-based unsolved problem, you need adult input from the school, because you can't necessarily agree to a solution and then tell the school this is what you have to do, right? So that's why there's some back and forth with the school, but again, doable. Just takes a little time and a little bit more challenging. But
so again, this is where I think a lot of parents falter because they feel like their kids aren't coming up with either anything, or what they are coming up with is like just impossible or infeasible, whatever. It just,
right.
And some parents might also even come to the conclusion, like my kid has no ability to problem solve in this way. Have you seen that, or do all kids just, you know, regardless of what's going on, have some ability to do this sort of thinking?
Well, when they start to understand that this is plan B and not plan A, they usually are very willing partners. Now, skill level to participate in this varies, of course, and that's, you know, starts with understanding the kid's lack of skills, but you being the partner, that's where you come in. So if the kid has no ideas, that's not where it ends. You're the partner, right? So you could float some tentative ideas. Well, what if we tried this? Would that work? What if we tried that? You know, you can even do a little direct brainstorming training by giving the kid, we call them 3 stems for thinking of ideas. You know, would ask for help work in this situation, and what would that look like? Might not work. Would do it a different way work in this situation? What would that look like? Would meet halfway work in the situation? What would that look like? And that can help, sort of those stems can start to help generate ideas. But you're the partner, and you can float some ideas. Now, if the kid is saying some things that are totally out there and not feasible, I always say, well, that's an idea. The thing about that is, and then I do that feasibility check that they didn't, you know, like, oh, the thing about that is, we have a budget we got to stick within. So, you know, I'm not able to build you your own basketball court. That's only yours. You know what I mean? You want to do that feasibility check out loud, and then say, let's keep thinking. You know, and again, we're partners here. I want to be clear too. These 3 steps typically don't occur in one sit down. You know,
I was just going to say that, because I could see a lot of these kids, just this whole interaction could end up becoming extremely frustrating for them, and then boom, they're off again.
Which we certainly don't want, right?
Yeah, because they can't come up with any ideas, then they feel stupid, then you're telling them that their idea won't work, you know, all these things that, again, just bring up all the issues that we're actually trying to help solve.
And you know, again, the reason why we're very picky about wording and making sure we're neutral and we're reassuring them along the way. But yes, absolutely, you might want to chunk this up, especially when you're new at it. You know, later on, when you guys, you know, your 25th Plan B conversation together, you know, things might start to move a little more quickly, you know, but at the beginning, for sure, you know, you might decide, I'm just going to do 10 minutes. And I get as far as I get in 10 minutes, and then we'll come back to it. The unsolved problem has been around a long time. It is not going to go away overnight, and be okay with it. And, you know, the more you approach the kid with Plan B, the more they're going to understand that it's okay to come along for this ride, the more that, you know, they're going to enjoy this partnership. And then when you start solving problems, wow, does that feel good? You know, I do a lot of coaching with schools and organizations, distance virtual coaching, and I listen to their audio recordings of their Plan B attempts with kids. And it's so fun when you hear a kid at the end of one, when they've solved a problem, it's going well, say, wow, I really liked that. I really feel like you're helping me. Oh my goodness, it's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, that's got to be a good moment for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine some people don't get there quickly, and so it requires some patience and persistence and
Mm-hmm.
perseverance and all those good P
It's
words.
exactly the reason why, yeah. I mean, it's one of the main reasons that Dr. Green started Lives in the Balance was to provide as many free resources as we could think of to help people get through the frustrating parts of learning this model because it can be frustrating. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things then, let me try this, how to weave this back into here. So this idea that that you're teaching them skills that they're missing out on. Um, does that come again just through the sort of back and forth of the how to come up with the solution, or is this happening also in the, you know, when the kid tries to put the solution in place and it either works or doesn't work, or they struggle with this, and you come back and you try to figure that out and you tweak maybe the plan that you've come up with, or you know, because I can hear some people saying, well, you know, my kids, I don't know, executive functioning deficits aren't going to go away by having a conversation, right? Like, this is crazy. He needs more help than this. Like, what is this doing for my kid in that regard?
Well, yeah, it's coming up. It's in the process of coming up with strategies, and then in the strategies themselves that skills are taught. So there's lagging skills behind a particular unsolved problem. So if you want to pick an executive functioning one, or one that might be about executive functioning, you know, difficulty keeping your room clean. So that topic is, you know, we might find some relation to executive functioning skills that a specific strategy that we work out will address and help them address, and they're probably going to need it as an adult too, right? And the 3-step process they're engaged in, there's so much indirect skills training I mean, we're articulating thoughts, needs, and concerns in words. We're taking on another's perspective. We're considering multiple solutions to a problem. There's all kinds of things happening within the 3 steps. So it's the topic itself and the 3-step process. And yes, certainly the follow-up to make sure that we have a durable, time-tested solution in place that that does the indirect skills training. We're not allergic to direct skills training by any stretch. We just find that Plan B gets a lot of it done. So, and there isn't worry about needing a technology to directly train skills. For a lot of those skills on our LSIP, there isn't a direct technology that we're aware of. So, and you don't need one necessarily.
But you guys are definitely finding and have found over the years that kids are learning these new skills. Like, they're not just finding workarounds to accommodate their lagging skills, but they're actually learning new skills.
Yeah, I mean, back in my residential days, the 3 steps for CPS is problem solving. That's how you solve a problem, right? And so I had the 16-year-old girl, and she had many CPS conversations. And she said she lived in a group home and they had free time. And she said to her staff, I want to stay out past curfew tonight. Let me guess what you're worried about. And she went up to the board and she said, this is what you're concerned about. My safety, you need to make sure, you need to know where I am, and the safety component. Here's where I'm coming from. My friend has a special thing going on. It's at school, so it's a safe place. Yeah, I'd be out an hour and a half late, but so how can we solve this? And she's on the board and she's coming up with and they just were like, she's getting this was a kid who would have been aggressive about this, pretty darn aggressive, and hurting people and just damaging property. So she has learned 3 steps for solving a problem. She's learned to take into account another's perspective. She's learned a whole bunch of skills, flexibility, adaptability. She has by initiating that whole thing herself, and the staff pat themselves on the back because she's taken that with her when she leaves. And that's the ultimate, right? When she goes out there, right? Because out there, yeah, she's not going to be met with people who necessarily know Plan B, and she doesn't need to be because she's got the skills. It's what she's bringing to the table. So her boss says to her, I know you're supposed to be off at 9, but the shipment truck just came. Can you stay late? And she's got concert tickets. right? I don't want her destroying the place she works. I want her working it out with her boss, right? And figuring it out. And, ultimately, a lot of people say, well, it's a plan A world out there. Well, it takes skills to adjust to plan A. And so we're going to teach these flexibility and adaptability skills for adjusting to plan A. But also, as adults, if you think about it, we rely a lot more on our problem solving skills than we do on our yes ma'am, yes sir skills. Not that we never do, but it's a lot more often that we're working together and collaborating and trying to solve problems. Even when you get pulled over for speeding, you're not necessarily going, okay, yep, just give me the ticket. You're saying, well, wait, let me just explain what was happening, and let's see if we can, you try.
Right, absolutely. What about some of these mismatches, though? So if you've got one parent who is way on board with this and the spouse thinks you're just, you're being easy on the kid, he needs to know who's boss, or, you do this at home, then they go to school and, they're losing their recess, they're losing their free time, they're they're getting all plan A everywhere except with you. Does that still work? Or obviously the best case scenario is to get everybody on board, but
It probably goes
realistic
faster
world.
with everybody on board, right? But no, it absolutely still works because you're giving them skills for handling what's going on elsewhere, right? Even if you were one teacher in a building of 50 and you're the only one working with kids, you're still going to make progress. You're the parent at home and you do it and you send them to a plan A school, you're still going to make progress, right? Certainly the idea that the co-parenting tension, we just talked about it again on our March edition of our parent radio show. We've done a 2 or 3 minute video on the topic that's about to come out at any point, and it's such a hot topic on the B team. The bottom line is that the parent who's worried about Plan B has valid concerns. And the model, the 3 steps, is not just for kids. So if you think about using the model with your co-parent to try to understand their concerns and validate them. They have valid concerns, and work hard to meet them while you're working hard as equally to meet yours, and it's just about opening lines of communication, really understanding where each other's coming from, and working on win-win solutions. And so the model can be really helpful between co-parents too. And pointing them to resources on the website that they can see that there's a lot of parents that had concerns and they've worked through them and they figured them out, and now they're on the other side and they would never go back to plan
A. What sort of time frame do you think is something that people should sort of thinking about? Because I assume this takes a fair amount of patience, and that there's some impatience on the part of, whoops, sorry about that. Sorry, I was hoping I would not have to edit this one, but animals, I tell you. Okay, so let's start that again. So I imagine some parents are probably just too impatient to get this going, and then they give up when they don't get immediate traction from their kid, or again, the solution they come up with doesn't work immediately. I mean, what sort of success, what's the sort of time frame that I mean, do you put anything out there? Obviously it depends so much on the kid and their circumstances, but I mean, is it like you got to give this at least 2-3 months to start seeing some real changes before you, or is there just no good rule of thumb at all?
It's hard to put timing on it. Sticking with it and seeing it through, and making sure you're actually doing plan B, because what happens is some people think they're doing plan B, but it's just super nice plan A. And so using the resources to make sure that there's fidelity to the model, and that's what I see a lot on the B team, people cheering each other on and helping them tweak and troubleshoot when it isn't going well, and then they go back to the kid and then suddenly it goes better and they get farther and now they're cooking and they get to a solution eventually. So it is about, making sure you're giving it the old college try. And a lot of people on the B team will say, I've started and stopped this a million times, and yet nothing else is working. And I'm still where I was 5 years ago. So what do I have to lose? I've really got to sink myself into this and really wrap my head around it and really undo everything I know about how to be a parent. And that takes time. It really does. And so, connect with us, connect with other parents, and let us be your cheerleader to get through how tough it is to learn, because when you get to the other side, it's a really nice place.
So I know we don't have much more time here. Two things. If people go through the website, maybe they want to sign up for the Facebook group and they're just overwhelmed. Are there sort of coaches out there who can work one-on-one with people if they really want some real step-by-step guidance and some real individual feedback?
So there is a list of certified providers, so people who have worked with Dr. Green very closely and had their work examined over a 24-week period that achieved certification. And that's actually going to be listed on the cpsconnection.com website under providers. Or you can email us from Lives in the Balance. There's a contact page and we'll let you know. And if you don't see anybody on there that's in your area, reach out to us. Sometimes people do virtual coaching. Sometimes there's people who haven't achieved certification but are well known to us and we would recommend. So, that just depends. But we would typically, we're a small organization, so we would definitely sort of reach out to some of the folks that we know and have worked with to provide that level of help. We are working on other options. We have some in place for educators and providers that we're working on to also provide to parents. It's less one-on-one, it's more small group, virtual group, fine-tuning your Plan B skills. And that might work for some families, and for others they're not interested in and they'd rather have the traditional provider. So we're trying to offer an array.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what if people listening to this are like, my God, we need to get this into our school district or just our school? I know you've done a lot of work with schools, and primarily in the New England area, I believe, right?
We're kind of everywhere.
Are there?
Sweden, Australia.
Are you now everywhere?
Yeah.
So how can people, what's the process for that? Or is there a place they can go to learn more about how you can invite this or approach your own school system, your district, your school? Or do you work only with individual schools, or do you tackle a district at a time?
Depends on what the schools want. We'll do whatever what makes sense. So there are some school-based providers listed on the certification provider page, but also we've done a lot of audio programming on that topic because there's different ways you can go about it, and it depends on the dynamics. We have care packages you can send to schools that give them a couple of the books and some other resources that say, really check this out. You can send it anonymously if you want. You can put your name on it. You can, or sometimes you have an in because you have a teacher or a para that gets it. And so you just start with that person, and introducing them to, again, free resources on the website. The entire model is on the website for free in audio and video format, and so you're not asking anyone to have to lay down any money or anything like that. And so sometimes that's the in, and sometimes it takes other forms. So, check out the parents page under the CPS resources tab, go down to our radio program, and you'll find that topic because it's a big one. How do we start collaborating with our kids' school? For sure.
Excellent.
Also, that's been a hot topic on the B team, so you can search in there for some great answers as well.
Excellent. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining us today, especially on your big snow day. Oh my goodness. Yeah, you gotta love winter.
I'm glad it's still
global warming
out.
winters.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, that's great. But we so appreciate the work that you do and that Dr. Green has done. And, the mantra, kids do well if they can, has been a huge one for me ever since I read about it. And I've shared it with so many people. And it's hard to keep in mind sometimes with our kids who get so frustrating, but keeping that firmly lodged in your head that there's something that's, that kids, they really do, their intent is not, it can look like they are just trying to undermine us or be manipulative or belligerent, but that's generally not what's going on, because as human beings, we're wired to connect with other people, and as kids, we're wired to please our parents. And so I love that this model honors that. And so thank you so much for sharing with this. And I urge everybody, I'll include the link to the website so people can start diving in. And don't get overwhelmed because there's a ton there, but it's a huge amount of free resources, and it's hugely valuable. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And
thank you for including
we'll say,
our work. We appreciate
absolutely.
it. Thank you for what you do.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for joining.